Imagine this. It's a hot July day in 1518 in the city of Strasbourg. A woman known to history as Frautrophia steps out of her home and begins to dance. Not a joyful, celebratory dance, but a frantic, unstoppable jig. She doesn't stop for hours. She doesn't stop for days. She just keeps dancing. There's no music, no festival, just this lone woman twisting and turning in the street until she collapses from exhaustion. This wasn't an isolated incident. This was the beginning of one of the strangest and most terrifying events in medieval history. The dancing plague of 1518. Within a week, dozens of others had joined Frau Trophia. Within a month, the number had swelled to over 400 people, all caught in the grip of this bizarre dancing compulsion. The city's authorities were baffled. They weren't just tapping their feet. They were flailing, screaming, and dancing until their feet were bloody and their bodies gave out. Some reports claim that as many as 15 people a day were dying from heart attacks, strokes, and sheer exhaustion. What on earth could cause something like this? The city's leaders, operating on the medical knowledge of the time, had a peculiar theory. They believed the dancers were suffering from hot blood. Their solution: more dancing. Yes, you heard that right. They thought the only way to cure the affliction was to let the dancers exhaust themselves completely. So they did something that seems almost comical in retrospect. They cleared open spaces, built a wooden stage, and even hired musicians to provide a soundtrack for the relentless dancing. The idea was to create a controlled environment where the afflicted could dance the fever out of their systems. But this only made things worse. The spectacle drew more crowds, and the music seemed to encourage even more people to join the frenzied mob. It was a public health disaster disguised as a street party. As the death toll climbed, the authorities realized their more dancing cure was a catastrophic failure. Desperate, they turned from medicine to superstition. They banned music and public dancing. The remaining dancers were rounded up and taken to a shrine dedicated to St. Vitus, a saint believed to have the power to cure compulsive dancing. They were given small crosses and red shoes and led in prayers. Slowly, over the course of several weeks, the dancing began to subside. By early September, the last of the afflicted had either recovered or tragically perished. The nightmare was finally over, but the question remained, and it's a question that still fascinates historians and scientists today. What caused the dancing plague of 1518? Let's explore the theories, because this is where it gets really interesting. One of the earliest and most persistent explanations is ergot poisoning. Ergot is a type of fungus that grows on damp rye, a common grain used for baking bread at the time. This fungus contains a chemical, ergotamin, which is the raw ingredient for LSD. Ingesting it can cause muscle spasms, convulsions, and vivid hallucinations. On the surface, this seems plausible. Spasms could look like dancing, and hallucinations would explain the bizarre behavior. However, there are problems with this theory. While ergot poisoning does cause them, it typically doesn't produce the coordinated day-after-day dancing described in the historical accounts. Furthermore, ergot poisoning often leads to gangrene by restricting blood flow to the extremities. None of the detailed records from Strasbourg mention gangrene as a symptom. So, while it's a tempting explanation, many experts have ruled it out. So, if not a psychedelic fungus, what else could it be? Let's consider the historical context. Strasbourg in 1518 was not a happy place. The region had been hit by severe famine, disease, and poverty. People were starving, they were desperate. The social and psychological stress was immense. This leads us to the most widely accepted theory today: mass psychogenic illness, also known as mass hysteria. This is a phenomenon where a group of people, under extreme psychological distress, begin to exhibit similar physical symptoms. Even though there's no underlying physical cause, it's essentially the power of the mind affecting the body on a massive scale. Think about it. You're living in a time of intense fear and anxiety. Your life is filled with hardship and a sense of powerlessness. On top of that, the local culture was steeped in superstitions, including a belief that saints like St. Vitus could inflict curses of uncontrollable dancing upon sinners. In this pressure cooker environment, Frau Trophia starts dancing. Perhaps she was dealing with some personal trauma or extreme stress. Others see her, and in their own stressed and suggestible states, their brains trigger the same physical response. The belief in a dancing curse provided a framework for their symptoms. It wasn't just random twitching. It was a culturally recognized phenomenon. The dancing became a trance-like state, a bizarre and tragic outlet for a community's collective trauma. The authorities' response, building a stage and hiring musicians, unintentionally validated and amplified the hysteria. By treating the dancing as a real, contagious disease that needed to be danced out, they gave it legitimacy. They poured fuel on the fire, turning a localized incident into a full-blown epidemic of the mind. It was only when they changed their approach, shifting from a medical cure to a religious one, that things started to change. By taking the dancers to the shrine of St. Vitus, they were engaging with the belief system that underpinned the hysteria. They were, in a sense, performing a large-scale placebo. The rituals, the prayers, the pilgrimage, all of this may have provided a powerful psychological release, allowing the participants' minds to break free from the compulsive loop. The dancing plague of 1518 wasn't the only event of its kind. Similar dancing manias were reported across Europe from the 14th to the 17th centuries, almost always during times of great hardship. Each time, a community under immense pressure seemed to spontaneously erupt into these strange, exhausting rituals. What the dancing plague teaches us is a powerful and unsettling lesson about the human mind. It shows how profoundly our social environment, our beliefs, and our psychological state can influence our physical bodies. It's a stark reminder that under the right, or rather, the wrong conditions, the mind can become a powerful force, capable of creating both miracles and monsters. The people of Strasbourg weren't possessed by demons or poisoned by bread. They were likely victims of their own minds, trapped in a feedback loop of stress, superstition, and social contagion. Their story is a bizarre, tragic, and utterly human one. A haunting historical footnote that reminds us just how thin the veil between our minds and reality can sometimes be. Thanks for watching. If you found this dive into history as fascinating as I did, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more strange stories from the past. See you in the next video.